In the ashes of defeat, a boy rose from tragedy. He swore vengeance not just for his family, but for Rome itself. Glory, betrayal, destiny. Scipio Aemilianus. This is the rise of Scipio Africanus. Hispania's rugged terrain made supply lines a nightmare, and Carthage's naval presence threatened to choke off reinforcements. Scipio adapted, sending small, fast-moving detachments to raid enemy outposts and seize provisions. In one instance, his forces intercepted a Carthaginian convoy carrying weapons and grain meant for Hasdrubal's camp, a windfall that allowed his men to endure a brutal winter without breaking. The third trial was strategic. The Carthaginians believed they had the upper hand, spreading their forces across multiple strongholds to keep Rome's attention divided. Scipio saw an opening in this overconfidence. He began laying the groundwork for a bold strike on New Carthage, Carthage's jewel in Iberia, a move so audacious that even his own officers questioned whether it bordered on suicide. These early trials tested every fiber of his leadership. Each decision carried the weight of survival, not just for himself, but for the Republic's last real foothold in Iberia. And yet, Scipio thrived in this crucible. His youth, far from a liability, became a weapon. He moved faster, thought sharper, and took risks that older commanders would have hesitated to consider. By the end of his second year in command, whispers spread through the ranks and among Iberian allies. Perhaps this young Roman was more than a survivor. Perhaps he was the one who could turn the tide against Carthage. But his greatest trial was yet to come. A gamble that would decide not only the fate of Hispania, but the trajectory of the entire war. Do you think Scipio's youth was his greatest advantage, or his biggest risk as a commander? If you were in charge of an army facing a stronger enemy, would you play it safe, or take the kind of bold risks Scipio was willing to take? The year was 209 BC, and Rome's grip on Hispania was fragile. For 2 years, Scipio had endured skirmishes, political doubts, and the shadow of his father's death. Now he was ready to strike, not with caution, but with audacity. His target was New Carthage, Carthago Nova, the Carthaginian capital in Iberia. It was a city of immense strategic value, a deep water port, an arsenal for Carthage's armies, and a treasury that funded their entire war effort in the region. Protected by formidable walls and a natural harbor, it was considered impregnable. But Scipio had studied it like a scholar poring over an ancient text. He noticed something others had overlooked: the lagoon on the city's northern side. At high tide, it was deep enough to prevent crossing, but at low tide, the water receded just enough to expose a shallow path. It was a vulnerability, and Scipio planned to turn it into the decisive stroke of the campaign. He moved with speed and secrecy. While Carthaginian forces were scattered across Iberia, Scipio led 25,000 men on a rapid march south. By the time the city's defenders realized the threat, Rome's legions had already encircled them. The assault began with relentless pressure on the main gates and harbor walls. This was no feint. It was a calculated distraction. Roman siege engines hurled projectiles, their infantry clashed at the front lines, and the defenders poured their attention into holding these positions. Meanwhile, under the cover of the chaos, Scipio sent an elite detachment of 500 men toward the lagoon. The tide was falling. Wading knee-deep through the water, shields held high, the detachment reached the walls from the undefended northern side. Scaling ladders were hoisted silently, and within moments, Roman soldiers spilled into the city from behind. The shock was immediate and devastating. Carthaginian defenders, caught between two fronts, faltered. Gates were thrown open from the inside, and Scipio's main force surged through. The fighting was fierce, street by street, but discipline held. Scipio had ordered strict control over plunder and civilian lives, a move that stunned even the city's inhabitants. This wasn't just conquest, it was calculated legitimacy. By nightfall, the Roman standard flew over New Carthage. In one stroke, Scipio had delivered Rome its first decisive victory in Iberia since the war began. The city's armories, silver mines, and shipyards were now in Roman hands. More importantly, the psychological blow to Carthage was immense. News of the victory rippled through Iberia. Tribal leaders, once hesitant to choose sides, now sent emissaries to pledge loyalty to Rome. Carthaginian forces, stretched thin and demoralized, began a slow withdrawal from key territories. For Rome, this was more than a military win. It was a turning point. Scipio had shown that Hannibal's empire could be dismantled piece by piece. For Scipio himself, it was the moment his name became a weapon, a rallying cry for Rome's allies, and a warning to its enemies. The boy who had sworn vengeance at his father's altar had now proven himself on the grand stage of war. But as the banners of victory fluttered in the Iberian wind, Scipio knew this was only the beginning. The road ahead led to greater challenges, and to Hannibal himself. If you were defending New Carthage, how would you have countered Scipio's lagoon tactic? Do you think strict discipline after a victory wins more loyalty than fear and destruction? Neo-Carthage had fallen, but Scipio's war was not over. His victory had sent shockwaves through the Carthaginian leadership, forcing them to reconsider their control of Iberia. For Scipio, however, this was just one battle in a much larger game. Hannibal was still in Italy, undefeated on Roman soil, and Carthage still held vast resources across the Mediterranean. In the months following the occupation, Scipio consolidated his power, turning allies into loyal partners and building a reputation as both a ruthless tactician and a defender of the innocent. His leadership style, discipline over plunder, respect over fear, gave him something rare in wartime, true loyalty from his conquered people. But that loyalty would soon be tested. The road ahead will take Scipio into even greater danger, against enemies far more cunning and daring. His next moves will not only decide the fate of the Roman campaign in Iberia, but will also set the stage for a final confrontation with Hannibal himself. So, will the young commander's drive lead him to glory, or will it lead him straight into the mouth of the Carthaginian lion? Like, share, subscribe to discover the truth about the talented Roman general